It all started on a quiet summer morning when I decided to spend some time by the lake. The water was calm, the breeze was light, and for a moment it felt like the world had slowed down. That peace didn't last long. Out of nowhere, Karen showed up, stomping across the shoreline like she owned the place. She pointed at the dock and said I had no right to be there because it was HOA property. The only problem with her claim? I'm not part of her HOA. In fact, the lake doesn't belong to her neighborhood at all. It belongs to me now. I had just finalized the paperwork, something I had been working on for months. The lakefront lot, every inch of it, was now mine. Still, Karen stood there with that same sharp tone, telling me I had to follow her community rules or leave. It was almost unbelievable. She was talking about rules that had nothing to do with me, trying to act like the extended its reach over everything in sight. I let her finish before I explained the truth. Not only did I have the right to be there, but she was actually standing on my property. Her face went pale for a second, then tightened back into that stubborn glare she's known for. Instead of backing off, she doubled down, insisting the HOA board would take action if I didn't comply. I couldn't help but laugh. What action could they take when the entire lake, from the shoreline to the dock, was now mine on paper and in law? The standoff had only just begun, and deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the type to walk away quietly. The question was, how far would she go to fight a battle she'd already lost? The thing about this lake is that it's not just water and trees, it carries history. Families had been coming here for generations, fishing, boating, and spending summers on the shore. For years, the HOA next door acted like they were the guardians of it all, even though the land records told a different story. They had built docks, posted signs, and made rules that gave the impression they were in control. But behind the scenes, the actual ownership had been tied up in messy paperwork, a forgotten deed that sat buried in the county records. That's what I stumbled across, and that's how I ended up as the rightful owner of the entire lot, including the lake. When Karen confronted me, I could see why she was so shaken. She had spent years bossing people around, probably enjoying the power of telling neighbors what color mailbox they could have or where they could park their boat. Now, with me standing there holding the documents, her authority crumbled in seconds. Still, it wasn't just about property lines. I could tell this was personal for her. The lake wasn't just a pond she liked to walk by. It was the crown jewel of her little kingdom. And now that kingdom had slipped right out of her hands. I didn't expect her to take the news lightly, but the way she stared me down told me this was far from over. She muttered something about bringing the board and making calls, like she was rallying her troops for a bigger fight. And while I knew the law was on my side, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about to get much more complicated. What happens when someone refuses to accept the truth, even when it's written in black and white? That night, I couldn't sleep. The lake was supposed to bring peace, a quiet escape away from noise and stress. But instead my mind kept replaying Karen's words. She wasn't bluffing when she said she'd bring the board. People like her thrive on control, and I knew she would find every possible way to stir up trouble. The thought of a full HOA committee marching down to my shoreline like they owned it wasn't far-fetched. What worried me more was the neighbors. Some of them had probably grown used to the HOA's grip, and if Karen painted me as an outsider trying to take away their lake, I'd suddenly be the villain in their story. The truth was, I had my own reasons for wanting this land. It wasn't just about the legal paperwork or the thrill of proving Karen wrong. My grandfather had fished here decades ago, back when the lake was still open and free to anyone who loved it. He used to tell me stories about campfires by the shore and long summer nights when kids swam until dark. Owning this place felt like reclaiming a piece of family history, something deeper than property lines. But to Karen, that history meant nothing compared to her HOA rulebook. Over the next few days, I started noticing little things. Cars I didn't recognize slowed down near my driveway. Someone left a neatly folded "Welcome to the Neighborhood" flyer on my porch, except it wasn't welcoming at all. It was a list of HOA regulations about docks, boats, and community standards. They were trying to rope me into rules that legally had no hold over me. It was subtle, but clear. Karen was rallying her forces. And the real question hung in the air: How far were they willing to go to push me out of what was now rightfully mine? The tension reached a new level one weekend when I came down to the dock and found a fresh set of signs hammered into the ground. Bold red letters read, "Private, HO members only." My hands clenched as I pulled one out of the soil, the metal stake still warm from the sun. It was a direct challenge, proof that Karen and her board weren't backing down. This wasn't just pettiness anymore. It was a battle for control of the lake itself. That evening, I spotted Karen standing at the edge of the water with two men I didn't recognize. They weren't neighbors, at least not ones I'd ever seen before. The way they scanned the shoreline, pointing at my dock, it was clear they were planning something. My stomach sank. This wasn't just about arguing at property lines anymore. It was about intimidation. She was testing how far I'd bend before I snapped. I thought about calling the county office again, maybe even the sheriff, but a part of me knew that would only escalate things. Karen thrived on drama, and if this turned into an official report, she'd spin it as though I was the one causing chaos. Instead, I decided to document everything. Every sign, every flyer, every strange car slowing down near my lot. It all went into a folder. If Karen wanted a fight, I would have the proof to show exactly what was happening. But then, late one night, the real shock came. I heard voices outside by the dock, faint but clear enough to make out Karen's sharp tone. Lights from flashlights cut through the dark, moving toward the water. My heart raced as I stood by the window, realizing this wasn't another empty threat. Something was about to happen, and I had no idea just how far they were willing to take it. I froze in place as the voices grew closer, their whispers sharp and urgent. Then I saw it, a shadow moving along the dock, carrying what looked like a bundle. My first thought was that they were just trying to intimidate me again, maybe some prank or stunt to scare me off my own property. But when the flashlight beam caught the water, I realized the bundle wasn't trash. It was a small motorboat, one of the few I'd left tied up at the far end of the dock. Panic surged. Whoever they were trying to take my property. And Karen. She was right there, barking orders, making it clear she had allies I hadn't even considered. For years, she'd been under the radar, but suddenly it felt like her network extended further than the hoe, further than I ever imagined. My lake, my family's history, was under direct threat, and there was no immediate help in sight. I grabbed my phone and considered calling the sheriff, but part of me hesitated. I couldn't risk escalating this into a confrontation that might be spun against me. That's when I remembered the old security cameras I'd installed months ago, mostly for insurance purposes. They were set up to cover the perimeter, and if I could get a clear look, maybe I could catch exactly who these people were. As I checked the feed, my stomach dropped. The camera revealed something I hadn't expected. One of the men wasn't a stranger at all. He was wearing a uniform with a badge that looked official, but it wasn't law enforcement. The implication was terrifying. This wasn't just an HO dispute anymore. Somehow, Karen had managed to pull in someone claiming authority, someone who might make their threats feel legal. The stakes had just skyrocketed, and suddenly I realized this fight for my lake was about to become far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. The next morning, I arrived at the dock determined to confront the situation head-on. The boat from the night before was still there, tied awkwardly to the piling, and Karen was pacing on the shore, clearly agitated. I walked up slowly, holding the folder of documents that proved my ownership. She stopped mid-step, narrowing her eyes, but I didn't back down. I laid everything out, the deed, the county records, even the photos of the signs and flyers. The weight of the evidence made it impossible for anyone to argue. For a moment, she looked like she might storm off, but then the man in the badge stepped forward. He cleared his throat, preparing to assert some authority, but I was ready. I had already researched the claims he could make, and the moment he tried to overstep, I countered with facts and records. The tension was electric, neighbors peeking from their windows, some whispering that they'd never seen Karen so defeated. One by one, the men with her muttered excuses and retreated. Karen's face turned red, a mixture of fury and disbelief. She had tried everything: intimidation, manipulation, even bringing someone pretending to have authority, but the law and the truth were on my side. I finally exhaled, Thinking the storm had passed, the lake mine at last. I untied my small motorboat and pushed it into the water, the gentle splash echoing a small victory. Just as I was about to smile, a loud honk came from the far end of the lake. I froze. A brand new boat, sleek and unfamiliar, appeared cutting through the water toward my dock. And at the helm was someone I never expected, a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years, waving and grinning like he had just discovered a hidden treasure. Suddenly, my lake battle wasn't just about Karen or the hoe anymore. Something bigger was coming, something I had no idea was waiting just beyond the horizon. The fight for the lake had ended, but a new story was only beginning. As the boat drew closer, my cousin jumped onto the dock with a big grin and a handful of stories about the family history I hadn't known. He had heard about the lake and wanted to reconnect with our roots, the same roots that had led me to claim ownership in the first place. The tension that had gripped me for weeks slowly began to lift. Karen was still on the shore, fuming silently, but I could see the fight had left her. The whole signs were meaningless now, and her attempts to control the lake had completely failed. Over the next few hours, we secured the dock, cleaned up the signs, and even laughed about the absurdity of the standoff. My cousin shared old maps and letters from our grandfather, revealing corners of the property I hadn't even explored yet. It wasn't just about ownership anymore. It was about preserving family history and enjoying the lake in the way it was meant to be, open, peaceful, and free. Neighbors began stopping by too, curious about the commotion, and many admitted they had been quietly rooting for me all along. The tension with Karen had taught them something important. Property and rules only matter as much as respect, fairness, and common sense. By evening, the lake was calm again. The sun reflected off the water, golden and soft, and I felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond legal papers or disputes. I realized the fight had been about much more than just land. It had been about standing up for what's right, protecting family legacy, and reclaiming a space that truly belonged to me. Karen never spoke to me again after that day, retreating into her little whole world, while I finally had the peace I'd been fighting for. Sitting by the dock with my cousin, watching the water ripple under the sunset, I knew the lake was mine, not just on paper, but in every story, memory, and moment yet to come. The battle was over, but the lake and its history would continue to flow freely.